Hey there, I'm Pastor Wynn with Family Harvest Church. We're so excited to be able to partner with the folks over at Eyewitness Bible Series to bring you the Easter series. These dramatic theatrical presentations were selected to be watched on each day of Holy Week, starting on Palm Sunday and ending on Easter Sunday. So, each night we will be with you at 7 p.m. And tonight, Wednesday, it's a very special night because right after this episode, which is entitled Spy Wednesday, it's all about Judas. We're going to have a roundtable discussion talking about these past episodes. It's going to be pretty cool, so stick around. So settle in and enjoy the presentation as we take one step closer to Jesus. Tonight's episode, Spy Wednesday, Judas. Jesus chose Judas to be an apostle. Apparently, Judas was taught the same things as all the other apostles and had the same types of experiences with Jesus, I guess I could say. It seems likely that Jesus loved Judas and valued him just as much as he did the rest of the crew. Well, at least until near the end. I don't know, maybe. Look, Luke never met Judas. What Luke knew of Judas likely came from the testimony of the other disciples and from the stories that he heard through the grapevine kind of thing, right? We don't read much about Judas before his betrayal of Jesus. It's easy to suppose the gospel writers so detested his betrayal that they were not even interested in saying anything really nice about him. But they also say very little about him, right? Half of the apostles never even mention him. So it may be that Judas was just like all the others. I don't know. But anyway, it's a very interesting story. We're not told in the Bible when Judas started drifting away from Jesus. Perhaps he expected Jesus to overthrow Rome, to establish an earthly kingdom, and he became disappointed when that didn't work out, when Jesus made it clear that his kingdom was a spiritual kingdom, perhaps. I don't know. It happened when Jesus called for his disciples to be fully committed, and Judas realized at that point that he didn't really want that. Or perhaps it was some difficult teaching that Jesus gave for Judas to embrace, right? And maybe he became embarrassed of Jesus, right? Maybe he didn't like Jesus' words or his actions. We don't know why or when, but we do know that his actions helped the result of Jesus' death. We do know that Judas betrayed Jesus. And the record shows. Luke chapter 14, verse 15 references a feast in the kingdom of God, since Jesus launches into one of the parables in reply. It is easy to overlook or misunderstand the reference. But the statement was made after Jesus mentions the resurrection of the righteous. The Pharisees believed the resurrection of the righteous, but they perceived they were the only righteous ones. And Jesus' parable not only discounts their likelihood of attendance, but also opens up the resurrection door for all of the people. The Pharisees had rejected that. The Pharisees rejected the Gentiles, and the Pharisees didn't like it. The Pharisees rejected the poor and the physically disabled and the disfigured. And they didn't like what Jesus was saying. And Luke 14:25 says the large crowds were with Jesus when he told them about the high cost of following him. Surely that kind of talk must have discouraged several in the crowd. But John chapter 6, verse 66 records a time when Jesus clarified how hard it was going to be to follow him, and many of the disciples turned away and left for good. Unlike many leaders, Jesus did not make it easy or cheap to be his disciple. He was interested in having only dedicated followers who were willing to count the cost and were willing to pay it. So, get settled in, get ready to be wowed, and enjoy tonight's presentation. We're going to take you one step closer to Jesus.
You know the end of my life story, most probably. Would I ask your indulgence to hear another part? My story up to midway through Jesus' ministry. At that point, I was still his friend.
Judas is mostly known for one thing: betraying Jesus. But was Judas always an evil person? Jesus chose him to be a disciple, and he followed Jesus faithfully for some time. Judas is not unlike many others through the ages who began as faithful followers.
Mine was a common name during my lifetime. Think of two original 12 apostles, Jude Thomas or Jude Thaddeus, or even Jude, the brother of Jesus. I was the outsider of the 12. From the beginning, I dressed differently, I spoke differently, and I thought differently. Although the gospel writers don't talk of my interactions in the group, you can guess that I didn't have any close friends among the apostles. And when I struggled, nobody to confide in. I was very skilled with money and was chosen to be the treasurer of our group, even though Matthew was known to be extremely talented in that area. The Bible doesn't say when, where, or how I became a disciple. You do know it was early into the ministry of Jesus. He believed I could be a fisher of men. I was as dedicated as any of the other apostles those first couple of years. I wasn't outspoken, but neither were the 6 other apostles that you know very little about. I was sent out as a pair with the other 12 and then as a pair with the 70. I saw Jesus do miracles and healings and heard all his teachings. I did miracles and healings. For the first couple of years, you wouldn't have been able to distinguish my ministry from the other 11. Jesus did not distinguish me from them either. He loved me as much as he loved them. I am Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. Scholars of your day have concluded that my father's name meant we came from Kirioth, a town about 10 miles south of Hebron or 30 miles south of Jerusalem. Those scholars have concluded that I was probably the only one of the 12 apostles who was not from Galilee. One Sabbath, we apostles went with Jesus to eat at the home of a prominent Pharisee. We were relegated to the cheap seats in the back of the room, where Jesus was seated near the front. As often would happen, the Pharisees were trying to find a way to disparage him. A man who was an obvious plant came to stand before Jesus. He had some abnormal swelling, and it was apparent to everyone in the room that he needed healing. Rather than being caught in a trap, Jesus set his own by asking, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" Hey, what a question. The Pharisees and experts of the law knew the spirit of the law encouraged such an action, but their man-made rules prohibited such a thing. They were caught in a trap of their own making and had no out. They could do nothing except remain silent, even after Jesus healed the man. The uncomfortable silence. Everyone hoped Jesus would change the subject, until Jesus changed the subject. He looked around the room and made the observation that everyone had been scrambling to get seats of honor. Imagine the red faces, because they had been doing just that. Jesus pointed out that it was a smarter strategy to take a lower seat and then receive a special honor if the host moved you to the front, eliminating the risk of being embarrassed in case the host asked you to take a lower seat. I'm sure that was embarrassing to all the guests in the room. But it was more embarrassing when they later realized he wasn't talking about seating at a dinner, but being humble in a relationship to God. Jesus then looked at the host and told him that he was not righteous when he invited friends and family to a dinner because they could just pay him back. But it was righteous to invite those who were not able to pay him back. Must have been a shock to the host and all the guests looking around. The only poor people in the room were Jesus and us, his apostles. I doubt anybody in the room had ever purposely invited a poor person to a dinner, except for a few relatives. Maybe. It was in situations like those that I began to be uncomfortable. Jesus not only insulted his host twice, but also insulted all the guests in the room. I wanted respect from the religious leaders, always did. But I also always hoped for some financial support from them too. Jesus never seemed concerned about money. I mean, in retrospect, I guess if you already own the whole universe, there isn't much on earth that you need. I mean, consider that in your own life. If you are truly the sons and daughters of God, what is it on earth that you don't already own? Well, back to the dinner at the Pharisees' house. There I was in my cheap seat, squirming in embarrassment, when one of the people near Jesus tried to change the subject again. The man said, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." That comment probably doesn't mean much to you, but it did to us in the room. I mean, we were all Jews. We had all been brought up with the notion that only Jews would be saved when the Messiah came. We did not have a well-developed notion of what heaven was or how you got there, but we were all certain that the Jews had exclusive claim to the benefits that would occur when the Messiah came. We were all certain that was true. I mean, especially the religious leaders of the Jews. We were all certain, except Jesus. Jesus wanted everyone to know that the kingdom wasn't coming on their terms, but on God's terms. And Jesus had been announcing those terms. Those who weren't willing to accept Jesus' terms were going to disinvite themselves from the feast, while those who were willing to accept the terms would enjoy it. The parable Jesus told clearly showed the religious leaders as disinviting themselves, while the obviously unclean people would get to enjoy the banquet. The man's comment had been right. The ones eating at the feast were blessed, but he misunderstood who those people would be. Needless to say, the banquet ended on a sour note, and we were not given any gifts or support. As treasurer, I was quite disappointed that Jesus not only didn't raise any money that night, but he had antagonized people that could have made our lives much better. I should have known it was just going to get worse from there. Not long after that, large crowds were following us everywhere we went. It would have been a simple thing for the Lord to give a little uplifting message and then pass the hat for some contributions from the crowd. Instead of doing that, Jesus raised his voice and said quite the opposite. "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brother and sister, and their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple." I can assure you that that is not the kind of message that is encouraging for a treasurer hoping to get more money. Your modern day translators and preachers can waltz around all they want, but Jesus said hate, and that is exactly what he meant. He meant that you not only had to be willing to do without those people and things in your life, but that you counted them as your enemies. And furthermore, he wanted you to become willing to give up your life, literally, in order to become his disciple. You can be assured that many of the crowds left before he could tell the next parable. The parable Jesus told next is my favorite because of its simplicity and obviousness. As with many of his parables, Jesus had seen something we had all seen, but had understood its deeper meaning. We had all seen buildings which were abandoned before they were finished, but never thought anything about them. Jesus understood them in a different way. He said, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower." He finished that sentence and looked around, nodding at a partial structure in the distance. Not many of us wanted to build a tower, but many of us wanted to build houses. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to finish? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish the building, everyone who sees it will laugh at you. They will say, "This person began to build and wasn't able to finish." From his past lessons, we apostles knew Jesus wasn't talking about buildings. I can't prove it, but when Jesus said that last sentence, I believed he looked right into my eyes, or right into my soul. Maybe that was the first time I realized I was not willing to give up everything to be his disciple. And if I wasn't willing to give up everything, I probably wasn't willing to give up very much. He made me count the cost of being his disciple. And I decided that I wasn't willing to pay the price. That was the day my doubts began. I recall Jesus saying, "Whoever is not with me is against me." Now that I knew I was not wholeheartedly for him, I started finding little ways to be against him. At first, I just discounted some of the things he said. I quit praying as much, and then not at all. I quit listening with attention. I wanted to raise as much money as I could. So I could steal more. If he said I was his enemy, I would prove that I was. You want to be a friend of Jesus? How much are you willing to give up? Or not willing, as the case would be? You can't do that. You can't be unwilling to give it all up. Jesus said that. Maybe you should quit trying to do what Jesus says you cannot do. You are either his friend or his enemy. And from my own example, you don't want to become his enemy.
My name is Mitchell Bearden. I'm 32 years old. I was born here in Nashville, raised in the town Kingston Springs. I was very blessed growing up. Good family. Didn't miss out on any opportunities that other kids had. My junior year in college, we were having a backyard football competition, and I tore a disc in my back. Went to the doctor and was prescribed painkillers. I never felt like an addict or anything like that because it was prescribed and, a doctor was telling me to take them. I guess that's kind of what started the denial part of being an addict.
Mitchell went to college at MTSU, and all this was going on while he was in college, and so I wasn't there to see things. And when he came home from college, there was a child I didn't really know. For me, I watched my friends and their children doing all these things growing up and or getting married and having children. And it was really difficult to think I would never see that.
My mother, she's an amazing woman. She's done everything for me. I woke up one morning and she obviously knew that I was intoxicated the night before. I was very foggy on the stuff that I was taking. I was out of my mind. I went and I grabbed a loaded pistol and I stood right in front of her and I put it to my head.
You'll never forget that vision. Never. I really thought he was going to do it. That's when I called the police and had him take him in, because I knew they would. I'd been told that if he threatens to take his life, that when you call the police, that they'll hold him for 10 days. And I thought, that's 10 days that I know he'll be alive.
I can remember laying there at night, having nobody to call. My phone wouldn't ring.
Every time the phone rang, and it was him, I couldn't really even bear to answer the phone because there was nothing good from any phone call I got from him.
I went it was over a year without speaking to my mother.
And then every night when you lay down and go to bed, you wonder, "Where's your child sleeping?" Because I knew he didn't have anywhere to stay. He had lost his friends, his family.
You look up one day and you are what you despise. And it's tough.
And you just lay there and it's really hard to go to sleep.
It was hell every day, the longest days of your life.
And all a mother wants for her child is to see them grow up and be happy. And after 10 years, I never thought that I would have that peace, or that he could have that peace. And then I found the Hope Center.
This has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, by far. It has been an uphill battle the whole way.
He really wasn't excited about going somewhere where he knew he was going to have to work and not get a paycheck, or, that didn't really set well with him.
There were tough times. You're gonna get angry. You're not gonna get enough sleep. You're gonna work hard.
Once I was able to see him, I saw that he was changing from the inside out.
It wasn't until I went through the Hope Center that I realized that what God actually wanted from me, and it wasn't to believe in him. It was to follow him.
They didn't try to give him medicine to get over his addiction problem, which they had before so many times at other places. And they pray their way through that.
But I'm to a point now, I've gained my family back. I've had a woman come into my life that's absolutely just opened my eyes to a whole new world, really. I can't explain how happy I am.
I have my son back, and he was missing for a long time. I have him back. He's engaged now to a wonderful woman, and I'm going to have those things that everybody else has because of the Hope Center. More importantly, it's not about me. My son is going to have what he's supposed to have. And he has an opportunity to make a great life for himself. And that's what the Hope Center has given us. Hope Center, it's all about hope.